Today is the day. Shadow of the Erdtree is launching across the globe in a matter of hours, or, depending on when you're watching this, has already been released. In either case, I felt this was an appropriate time to give my final thoughts on the base game and my hopes for the DLC. First, let me say that the almost 2.5 years between release and this day have been some of the hardest for me from a gaming perspective. Elden Ring did not live up to many of my expectations, as I'm sure many of you are aware, and they took a full year to announce DLC at all. Not only that, but the DLC isn't addressing any of my disappointments. No 6-player multiplayer, no arena fixes, no covenants, no invasion zones, the list goes on. It's just an expansion. More story, more exploration, more dungeons, more bosses. More of everything that made Elden Ring what it is. Which is to say, a lot. Elden Ring is the biggest non-MMO game I've ever played. I've never played something that took me 100 hours to beat, making steady progress, and still not getting everything done. Some players love this about the game. For them, more is more. But for me, less is always more. I generally prefer shorter games. Not necessarily games with not much to do, but games that I can complete in a reasonable amount of time. For me, 20 to 40 hours is a perfectly reasonable long game first playthrough. All of my favorite games have been completable in at least this time frame, with some being much less than that. Obviously, Elden Ring is not that type of game. But that's okay. Elden Ring is its own thing. It doesn't have to cater to me. Realistically, it shouldn't. Games are the expressive effort of their creators, not their players. Some games play with that dynamic and respond directly to player feedback, while others ignore it completely. Elden Ring and From Software are largely in the latter camp. They build their games not despite their players, but without regard to their every whim, instead using what they know about their players to inform the experience they're crafting. And I respect that. I think From Software is one of only a handful of developers in the modern era that have the integrity and structuring to make something with true artistic merit with hundreds of people involved. We live in an era where new and creative ideas only exist in gaming in its smallest form, indie development. It just takes too many resources to make a competitive modern AAA game to have it prioritize being art. But From Software and Elden Ring, among few others, have proved that model short-sighted and compromising. They've demonstrated that games can fulfill their profit directive while remaining worthwhile, at least for now. And while I haven't loved the direction of Elden Ring versus the likes of Dark Souls or Bloodborne, it is not for a lack of quality. Elden Ring is a great game. It's fantastic. It's 10 out of 10 on so many levels. But it is compromised. Not because of greed or disinterest, but because of ambition. Elden Ring is one of the most ambitious games I have ever played. It's staggering just how much they managed to do in a single title intended for a primarily single-player experience. The scope and scale, the depth and breadth, all of it screams of the developer's hunger for something truly grandiose. And while I don't think it necessarily got all of it right, it has impressed me. And I am not easily impressed. I am a certified hater with a PhD in dyslogy, and I hate a lot of things about Elden Ring. I am not interested in fighting repeat bosses. I detest long stretches of travel. I despise the open world aimlessness. I hate doing chores. And Elden Ring brings all of those in spades. It's a game that's about 3 times larger than I'd like, and I feel it's almost 2/3 filler. But that's all to say, inside Elden Ring is the sort of game I want. It's just wrapped in enough packaging to mess with the experience. Not completely ruin it, mind you, just make it feel less worthwhile. Like eating your pizza straight out the oven and it burns your hands and mouth, so you drop it and curse God for making temperature so hot before going back for a second slice and a second round of burns, thus perpetuating the endless cycle of burning and cursing on and on until you either die a hero or finish the pizza. I think I would have liked the game a lot more if they had done something really simple and made each playthrough more choice-driven and unique. I'm the kind of person who really likes to do as much as possible in a playthrough while also having to make divisive choices. So by having practically every aspect of the game completable on a single playthrough, I got burned out. I did too much. I searched every corner and crevice until I couldn't bring myself to search anymore. I gave up and demanded the game be over. I got bored. And that's a first for me in a FromSoft game. Every other game has filled me with horror, anticipation, anger, frustration, and just about every other emotion, but never boredom. In that regard, Elden Ring stands alone. And that's okay too. Elden Ring doesn't have to mesh with my preferences, and it doesn't have to be a smaller game. The story of Elden Ring is big, so a big world makes sense. Of course, the story of every Souls game is big, and they all have big worlds, but Elden Ring has the most literally big. It's massive. It's like 2 Skyrims. Which, as much as I might not care for it, is impressive. Not because of the sheer size, but because the world is actually interesting. At least twice as interesting as Skyrim. And it may not be as dense as I'd like, but its locations are strong. Its visual definition of each area is meaningful. I can remember them as well as I can remember any FromSoft location. It's a good world. But it's still a lot. For anyone who's played RuneScape, you'll know that it's a pretty big world. And that world feels a lot bigger when you factor in that you have to walk everywhere. It makes travel a real ordeal and helps make it feel daunting. I appreciate that approach in some ways and less so in others, but it's an effective tactic that I think accomplishes its goal. Elden Ring, on the other hand, uses its mount to make travel possible. Without Torrent, there are many areas in the game that you simply cannot get to. And for the areas you can get to without Torrent, the distance and pace you travel is staggering. This is a big deal for the successor to a game series about exploration via dungeon crawling and action RPG mechanics. Exploration is great, but letting it be as unrestrictive as it is in Elden Ring left me wanting for a little more structure. And that's okay. Not all games are meant for me. The game I want does not exist. I have to accept that and play the games I'm given. But I appreciate when games and their creators have the self-awareness to know where they can improve. For me, the open world was a miss. The mounted travel was a miss. The catacombs were a miss. It's all just a lot of extra time for a less dense experience. Which represents my combined hope and fear for Shadow of the Erdtree. I want it to be a lot. I want it to be the second chance the game deserves. To give everyone what they want, something different for those like me, and a victory lap for everyone else. But that's a tall order. For Shadow of the Erdtree to be what I want, it needs to be concise, and not only mindful, but critical of its foundation. It needs to know what Elden Ring got right, and what it got wrong. Not only that, but it needs to be willing to address those problems and risk alienating players who have no complaints. And that's the sort of move that requires integrity beyond reproach. Integrity I think From Software is capable of. But I don't think that's how it's gonna play out. No, I think Shadow of the Erdtree is an elaboration rather than a revision. I doubt it's trying to fix anything. Instead, I assume it just wants to build higher. And that's okay. For me, all I can really ask is that Shadow of the Erdtree is From Software bringing their A game. That they know what makes Elden Ring good and want to capitalize on those elements. Because at the end of the day, my problems with Elden Ring are less about what it is and more about what it isn't. I wanted a game that focused on PvP, that expanded its multiplayer, that put a hardcore experience at the forefront and wasn't afraid to back me into a corner. Instead, I got one of the most accessible games I've played in years that's often less fun with friends. There are many people like me, possibly even you, who think Elden Ring gets too much unchecked praise, that maybe it doesn't deserve every ounce of its hype without some big asterisks. And there are people who think just the opposite. I'm a skeptic when it comes to industry trends and the clutches of capitalism trying to establish infinite growth in an area that I consider intentionally niche. I'm a cynic when it comes to expecting things to ever be good in the face of an overwhelmingly negative reality. But Souls games, including Elden Ring, are good. They give me something to look forward to that also has mass appeal. These releases are the only cultural moment I've been a part of since Game of Thrones, and this has been a much more rewarding experience. And I'm excited to experience another cultural moment with millions of other people. Even if I'm cynical about the game, it's still something I'm passionate about. As much as I think people should be a lot more critical of the things they love, this is a moment where it's okay to set that aside and just enjoy something. A rare treat indeed. And to everyone watching who thinks I'm crazy for even bothering to express negativity toward a game, that's okay too. I know how I feel and why. Maybe I can even convince you to be a little more discerning and demand a little better from everything made for entertainment. After all, it's fun to critique things. It can be cathartic to criticize. It leads to passion when those things withstand your judgment. Knowing why you feel the way you do is rewarding in a way seldom experienced, and Elden Ring is worthy of it all. But if that's not your style, you have nothing to worry about. Shadow of the Erdtree cannot possibly disappoint because that's impossible. Elden Ring is perfect, just as all things you enjoy are perfect. You'll die happy and experience everything cool. I envy you. And I hope my teasing is taken in jest. It's easy to get heated about something you love, and Elden Ring is a compelling work. For a $60 game, it's well worth its price. For $40 more, I suspect we're still getting the better end of that deal. From Software has never made a bad DLC, and I can't even remember what I paid for any of them. The price is a formality, with the unfortunate stipulation that it'll still be too much for some. So if you want to issue some goodwill into the world, maybe work together with your friends to make sure everyone has access to this moment. And otherwise, play it if you can. Moments like this are rare in gaming, where the thing that everyone cares about is actually worth caring about. Don't let it pass you by. Shadow of the Erdtree early reviews are in, and by every account, it's practically flawless. While I won't be convinced until I play it for myself, it's a good sign. I can only imagine a world where gaming journalism doesn't singularly agree on the biggest releases, but the fact that I've yet to hear a detracting negative review tells me we're in for the best we can hope for. So, if you've got mixed feelings about Elden Ring thus far, do me a favor and put that aside. Go into Shadow of the Erdtree with strong arms and an open mind. From Software has earned my respect time and again, and I'd be a fool to think this isn't something worth playing. They've earned the opportunity to get it as right as an expansion can, to cap off Elden Ring on an uncontested win. And for all of us skeptics, all that matters is that we're giving it another go, because that is how I view this expansion. Another chance to love the game, to learn something new about myself as a player, and games as an art. And I'm confident it'll deliver. That's it for this video. If you're watching this before you play the DLC, please leave a comment about what you're most excited for. If you're watching this after, leave a comment and tell me how much sense this video makes in the future. I'm doing my best to temper my expectations, but it's hard not to be excited. I want to fight the Lion Dancer. I want to get the black armor. I want to beat Mesmer and adopt his snakes as my own. And I want to be proven wrong on as many fronts as possible. I want From Software to show me, as they have so many times before, that I don't know what I don't know, and that I have so much to learn. So let's focus ourselves on giving this game our undivided attention, lest we forget why we fight. I'm off to perform my pregame ritual of eating piping hot pizza straight out the oven. I'll see you on the other side.